What's going on, y'all? It is Thursday, September 21st, 2023. With that officially being said, it means tonight we've got a football game on. We have the New York Giants going up against the San Francisco 49ers, Thursday night football. We all predict the San Francisco 49ers to pretty much have anything at their disposal and just absolutely beat down the New York Giants. That's what we expect. Who knows? The New York Giants did come back, although it was against the Arizona Cardinals, and we all suspect the Cardinals to have the first overall draft pick. Giants did come back from down 21 points, won that game. So maybe they found something that works with Daniel Jones. Maybe they found something for this team overall in terms of what they have as weapons. That's the tricky thing with week one and the start of the season, is you don't know what you have until you already seen it on the field. So enough with that being said, of course, we have another great slate of college football games, another great slate of NFL games. Football is back. Life couldn't be any better. With that being said, as y'all know, that's textbook. The biggest story in the offseason has been Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. We saw what Justin Fields did last year, especially towards the end of the season. He was fantastic. He was superb, except he was fantastic and superb as a rusher. He wasn't fantastic and superb as a passer. But going into this offseason, you felt that, well, maybe they have the first overall pick. Maybe they can put some pieces around Justin Fields for him to succeed. And we're all expecting him to get that big leap coming into this year. The Chicago Bears were the most hyped team in the offseason. And now, as we're here today on September 21st, they are 0-2 and everything seems to be falling apart for the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields, and within that organization, there's the story around their defensive coordinator, him resigning. We don't know the full details. At least Chicago hasn't released the full details, but there's some speculation. Doesn't sound good. And then, of course, there's the problem with the Chicago Bears in terms of Justin Fields being the biggest storyline, the play calling also being another big storyline. And Fields he's actually regressed this year, looking into it. And when I watched the film and when I watched the QB breakdowns from JT Sullivan, if you haven't watched those videos or if you don't follow JT Sullivan, you need to go to the QB school, follow him. He's got some really great content that you can see and you can understand the concepts behind some play calling. Really informational. But what I watched and take away from watching Fields in the game broadcast and then watching the film, some of it is him and also some of it's the play calling. And I'll get into the play calling later, but as for Justin Fields, he's struggling to see the field, especially on the backside ends. So they'll have some routes. Sometimes they'll split the field in half and just have some reads on the left side of the hash marks or the right side of the hash marks. And that you think would help your quarterback because it condenses the type of reads he has, but it also condenses the type of space you have. So a lot of the routes, like you'll see a lot of the routes just be right on top of each other. And in the NFL, that's just not going to cut it. You need some type of spacing. That's a problem. But Justin Fields, as I alluded to, he's struggling to see the field. We all know the famous screenshot. They're going down. They're in the red zone. Justin Fields has a seam route wide open to the back. He doesn't take it for whatever reason that is. Instead, he forces himself to run, and he runs into the defensive tackle's arms. And he's also struggling to see the backside in. He'll get to some of his regressions, but you can see he's just hesitant. Maybe that hesitation in his mind is him saying, okay, there's a lot of people counting on me to be the guy. I can't make any mistakes. I can't force any turnovers. And that's fine. But in the NFL, you have to understand what open is. And sometimes you just got to let it go and let your wide receiver, who we all hope is going to make the play. Okay, it's not your job to, as a quarterback, to make sure that the wide receiver is running after the catch. Your job is just to put the ball in the best location, let them catch it, and go on from there. So he's doing too much and he's overthinking. And what I liked, a lot of people didn't like that he said in his press conference, I think it was yesterday, my goal is to just say F it and let all of it go. A lot of people didn't like that, but when you watch the film and you watch those film cuts, the all 22 cut, that should be a good thing because he has to let the ball go. On that seam route, you have to find the guy open. You have to see him right there. You got to let the ball go. There's a lot of what they'll run, which is mesh, and mesh is like, let's say you have two wide receivers and they're running crossing routes. And then you'll have either a tight end or another wide receiver run to about the middle of the field and sit down in the zone and hook right there. Sometimes he's missing that hook route. So a lot of it's him, a lot of it's the play calling. Some of it is the type of personnel that they have. I don't know if the Chicago Bears and Ryan Poles have put enough for Justin Fields to succeed going into this offseason. What was your goal? Was your goal to build the best overall team, or was your goal to build the best team, the best type of weapons for Justin Fields? I don't see that type of progress. Of course, we all don't, but I'm not faithful that Ryan Poles has put enough for Justin Fields to succeed. We'll see. He did get DJ Moore, but in terms of Claypool and Kmet, the type of money he gave to Kmet, now I know it wasn't something massive for Kmet, but it's still something valuable. And you could say, hey, if Kmet doesn't work out, I still got Robert Tonyan, or I can try to find someone else. Maybe with those 2 first-round picks I have, that can turn into Brock Bowers. Who knows? But that's my take on Justin Fields. It's the play calling, it's the spacing, and also within the play calling, it's the way they're utilizing him. They're trying to make him, it seems like, to be Aaron Rodgers, and Luke Getsy, he worked with Aaron Rodgers, and they did say, at least Fields did, that he was watching film and trying to, take some things away from Aaron Rodgers, which is good, but also you have to let Justin Fields be Justin Fields because he is one of the most dynamic runners at the quarterback position. I want to say ever, but you still have Lamar Jackson and Michael Vick, but he's still up that tier, like one of the best in that tier. So you have to let Justin Fields be himself, get him out in space, get him out on read options, which they haven't called him as much. Maybe things get better for the Chicago Bears. Maybe this is a team where Luke Getsy's trying to find out what he has on the field, because you can see it in practice in OTAs and training camp. But it's a lot different compared to on the field, because on the field and in the regular season, it counts. And Justin Fields last year, he got off to a slow start. About week 2, I think they only let him throw a couple of passes, like 8 passes, or he only completed like 2 passes in week 2 against Green Bay. It felt like everything was crashing down. Then about week 6, in the Commanders game, he really started to take off. The offensive play calling started to take off. The following week, they beat the New England Patriots. It was shocking to see how efficient Justin Fields was against a Bill Belichick defense, which is usually has young quarterbacks struggle. So maybe I still have hope for the Chicago Bears team. I still have hope for Justin Fields because I can lean on, okay, he struggled last year early on until about week 6, week 7. Then he really started to take off. That's my hope for this team, for the play calling, for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears. But of course, I appreciate my audience. I love your all's opinion. I love y'all's support. This channel is growing. The subscribers are growing. The likes are growing. I appreciate y'all. Let me know in the comment section, is there still hope for the Chicago Bears, or should they tank full out outright if by week 6, week 7, you see no progress with Justin Fields? Do you let it go and do you go after Caleb Williams? Let me know in the comment section. Once again, I appreciate my audience, appreciate all your support. That concludes the end of the first segment for this podcast. If you haven't already, get on your phone, go on to TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, any of those channels, type in the search bar at That's Textbook Sports or That's Textbook Sports. Click on the profile, hit follow, and then since you're already on your phone, go on to Twitter or X, type in the search bar at textbook_sports, or just type in That's Textbook Sports. Click on the profile, click on follow, subscribe, like this video, share this video. Be a friend, tell a friend. You don't want to miss any of my content that I have coming up. Many NFL draft scouts have given really rave reviews to this upcoming quarterback draft class. They're saying it's one of the most stacked quarterback classes ever, possibly. It's a draft class that features Caleb Williams, Shedeur Sanders, Drake May, Quinn Ewers, Michael Penix. Then you've got a couple other guys out there like Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels. Maybe not on the same level as some of these other guys, but pretty good talent nonetheless. Now, I'm hesitant to say it's one of the best draft classes ever just because I feel like with any quarterback draft class that features about 4 or 5 decent quarterbacks, everyone thinks it's one of the most stacked. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to have franchise and superstar quarterbacks. That usually doesn't happen just because in 2021, we also thought that class was going to be possibly the best ever. I mean, it had Trevor Lawrence. He went first overall. Then second overall, you had Zach Wilson. Then third overall, you had Trey Lance. And then at about pick 11, you had Justin Fields. And then pick 15, you had Mac Jones. Now, that draft class was I think it's the first draft class to ever have 3 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3. And we all thought, we all know how that draft class has panned out so far. Trey Lance has been traded. Zach Wilson looks like a bust. Or maybe he already is a bust. Justin Fields, we don't know. It's trending in the wrong direction. Mac Jones, you still don't know, but he's looked decent so far this season. Trevor Lawrence, he had a good year last year. We'll see how he can combat that or if he can raise his level of play. Now, this draft class, like I said, in 2024, has some really talented guys, but you still don't know. You're always projecting when you draft someone, especially a talent like Caleb Williams, who we all project to be this next superstar, Pat Mahomes-esque. But what I will say about this draft class is you're going to find a lot of QB-needy teams, much like in 2021, be really in dire need of a quarterback and give you a massive haul. Now, it might not be 3 first-round draft picks or something like that, but there's going to be a team who doesn't need a quarterback that maybe falls within the top 10, top 7, wants to trade back, and then is going to have just a monopoly of resources. And then there's going to be some teams who maybe they're like, yeah, I like this prospect, but I can also get a guy in the second round, or I can find a bridge quarterback and wait for a couple more years. That's going to say maybe some premier other position, like an edge rusher, becomes available at pick 10, when in previous years, if it was a weak quarterback draft class, that edge rusher is probably going at pick 5. So like for instance, with the 2021 draft class, that was a class that went 1 Trevor Lawrence, 2 Zach Wilson, 3 Trey Lance, 4 Kyle Pitts. Now Kyle Pitts, coming out of the draft, was reviewed as this generational talent. Kyle Pitts in any other draft probably would have went second or third. He was just that type of stud talent. Then you had Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain. Parsons fell to pick 12. Rashawn Slater, who's a great left tackle, he fell to pick 13. So you get what I'm saying when it's a strong quarterback class, there's usually a lot of other premier talent out there that gets left down for others later in the draft because all these QB-needy teams are willing to do whatever it takes to go get that quarterback. That's my spin on it. I like this QB draft class. Who knows? Caleb Williams is still undecided about coming out. There's reports and rumors that Shedeur Sanders doesn't want to be the QB2 to Caleb Williams. So when he comes out of the draft, he wants to be the unanimous first quarterback taken. Obviously, all these other teams that don't need a quarterback are hoping that these quarterbacks in college keep doing well, so that way they can get a player like Parsons or a player like Chase or Sewell, some really premier positions to fall down to them at pick 15, pick 12. That concludes the first half of this podcast. If you like this podcast, please go to my social media, my YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok account. Type in That's Textbook Sports, click the profile, click follow, and then finally go on to my Twitter page at textbook_sports, or just type in That's Textbook Sports. Click the profile, click file. You don't want to miss any content I have. So there's some instances where the more things, or over time, some things never change. And that couldn't be any more true for the Los Angeles Chargers. Once again, against the Tennessee Titans, they fall short in the late game scenario. And under Brandon Staley, they fall short in the late game scenario. So who's to blame with this Chargers team? Because this is a team that for the past couple of years, many have thought could make a run at the Super Bowl, could make a deep run in the playoffs, in the postseason. That hasn't happened so far. But this is a team that has the overall talent. They have an offensive line. They have a defensive line. Now with the defensive line, here's what I'll say. It's very solid and very good, but they do lack a defensive tackle. And they do have Khalil Mack, but Khalil Mack is aging, and he hasn't produced the way they would have thought him to have produced. Now, as far as the secondary, they do have a secondary, and a pretty good one. J.C. Jackson, big time signing from free agent from the New England Patriots, hasn't panned out so far. Probably the best player on that secondary is Asante Samuel Jr. He's played fantastic. We all know his big breakout game was in the postseason against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I believe, what did he have, like 3 interceptions or somewhat? It was an absurd amount. But even in that game, they still fell short when they had a massive lead. So who's to blame? Is it Justin Herbert? Is it Brandon Staley? Because a lot of the blame seems to be going both ways. A lot of people on social media and in the media want to blame Justin Herbert for his lack of clutch gene. They also want to blame Brandon Staley because he's a defensive head coach, and yet, despite being a defensive head coach, they're 10-15 when the offense doesn't score 30 points. That's a big problem. It's a big problem that your defense is giving up 30 points or more, 25 plus or more, when you're a defensive head coach. Now, this is an offense that's very good. They can compete with a lot of other offenses. They have Keenan Allen. They got the rookie Quentin Johnson. They have Mike Williams. Austin Eckler, phenomenal. They have an offensive line. So what necessarily is the problem for these Chargers? To me, in my opinion, that's always going to be Brandon Staley, just because his decisions in late game scenarios. And here's one that always I can't get over, was when a couple years ago, they're playing against the Las Vegas Raiders. There was a scenario where both teams could have went into the postseason. Chargers, Justin Herbert, he was magnificent that game, saving that team's behind, doing everything he possibly could, completing 4th down after 4th down, and not only just 4th down like 4th and 5, like 4th and 10, 4th and 12. But yet, Brandon Staley made the decision that I think he called a timeout when the Raiders had the ball, and they were pretty competent with just saying, hey, we're going to let this clock run out, let it go into a tie, and then both of us are going to get into the postseason. Staley called a timeout. That was the end of that. Chargers missed the postseason, and then, of course, there's been other times in late game scenarios where Staley's just missed. They bring in Kellen Moore. It still hasn't been clicking. And with the Justin Herbert clutch gene, here's what I'll say. Justin Herbert, yes, he also needs to take some blame. But, I mean, come on. The defense, if you're scoring 30 and you still can't win, I don't think you need to blame the quarterback, because the quarterback is doing all they can. These guys, these football players, they're not Superman, even though we all portray them to be because they have such rare talent. They're not Superman. They can't save your behind 24/7, 365. They just can't. So yeah, it's hard to have that clutch gene when the defense is consistently giving up points. You're consistently every down having to save the team's behind. Now here's this one stat that I pulled up, found about Justin Herbert that sheds light on his clutch gene. Since Brandon Staley's been the head coach, when he took over in 2021, Herbert has had 20 possessions in late game scenarios, which is overtime and with 4 minutes to go in a one-score game. Of those 20 possessions, he's been successful in 10. So 50% of the time, he's successful. Appreciate my audience. Let me know who's to blame for the Chargers' mishaps in late game scenarios, or is this just something where it's just one of those teams that's kind of applied to you? Every single year, you talk to some Chargers fans, they're going to say same old Chargers because it just, for some reason, consistently happens to this team. So let me know, is it same old Chargers? Is this just going to be something that sticks with them? Or is it Herbert? Is it Staley? Let me know in the comment section. I appreciate your support. We are officially 3/4 of the way done with this podcast, and you know what that means. We're entering crunch time. So if you haven't already, be sure to go to my YouTube, Spotify, and TikTok account. Type in @ThatsTextbookSports or just type in ThatsTextbookSports. Click the profile, click follow, be a friend, tell a friend, share it with your friends. And then secondly or lastly, go to my Twitter account, type in ThatsTextbookSports or @textbook_sports. Click the profile, click follow, subscribe to this video, like it, be a friend, tell a friend. I appreciate your support. It's not always necessarily about how you start, but it's always about how you finish. Last year, the Cincinnati Bengals, they went 0-3, had a really rough start. Looked like the sky was falling down, Chicken Little was out. But yet they still went to the AFC Championship game. Now, yes, Bengals fans, they all wanted to win that AFC Championship game, and of course, they wanted to win the Super Bowl. But just about any other team out there that started out 0-3 would have loved to have went to the AFC Championship game, to say the least. But it still got better for the Cincinnati Bengals. This year, they're in a very similar situation. They started out 0-2, looked really rusty. Chase needs to get more targets. The offense isn't really going well. The defense isn't clicking well. But I still have hope just because this is one of the most dynamic offenses in the league, featuring Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow. They're going to get things set out the way. They just have to get the offensive line squared up. That's been the talk of Cincinnati for quite some time now. I still believe in this Bengals team. Now, defensively is where I find the problem with this team because they did lose a lot of pieces defensively. They lost Von Bell, who's an underrated player for that team that many don't recognize. Jesse Bates, of course, Jesse Bates was going to require a lot of money to sign him, and you still had to pay you still have to pay Chase. You still have to pay Higgins. Who knows how that'll pan out with T. Higgins? It's not looking good so far right now. But you weren't going to pay Bates, so you let him go. But defensively, those young guys you drafted, Cam Taylor-Britt, all those other guys, they have to step up. But I still believe in this Cincinnati Bengals team, even though the division's gone a little bit tougher and they've got a tough schedule ahead of them. Now, one of the other best teams to start 0-2, in my opinion, is the New England Patriots, because they've had probably one of the most toughest starts or toughest strength of schedules. These first 2 weeks, you got to go up against the Philadelphia Eagles. We all know them. Then you got to go up the next week against the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa with Tyreek Hill and all those plethora of weapons that he has around him. And yet, in both of those games, it was a one-score game. They had the chance late, but they just didn't connect and didn't finish. If you're a New England Patriots fan, of course, some of y'all are going to be upset that you're 0-2. I'm not a big fan of moral victories either, but considering this team's strength of schedule, considering how they looked against that strength in those teams. This is something very encouraging. And that kid, Christian Gonzalez, he's phenomenal. Seeing him, like NBC cut to the matchup between he and Tyreek Hill. I'd never seen a cornerback, especially a rookie cornerback, nonetheless, handle that ground and not get overwhelmed. Speaks volumes to who he is as a player, what his technique is. Looking like someone, he's in contention for that defensive rookie of the year. We'll see. But the New England Patriots, they to me are one of the best teams to be 0-2. Things will get better from them. Although they do have a tough division, they still need to keep their heads up because it's going to get better at some point in time. So for the upcoming podcast, and last week I introduced this segment where I'll be talking about the team that if they lose this week, the wheels could really start to come off. This thing goes south very quickly. Last week I talked about it being the Chicago Bears. They did lose against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've seen the reports of what's gone on in that organization recently. This week, ironically, it's going to be two teams who are battling against each other in the Minnesota Vikings and the LA Chargers. For the Minnesota Vikings, there's already been reports and rumors that they don't see Kirk Cousins as a long-term, and of course, he's getting older. So this is a team that's looking like they might want to enter a rebuild mode. Now, they do have Justin Jefferson. How's he going to take that? He might not take that very kindly to be in a rebuild mode. He might want to be a player that's searching in the pursuit of championships and wins. Very interesting to see how that plays out for them. Then if this thing keeps going south and they do lose, and they lose the couple of following games, maybe eventually they do ship off Kirk Cousins. He goes to New York or somewhere else. You see that type of possible scenario and path for the Minnesota Vikings. And then for the LA Chargers, you can't lose against the Minnesota Vikings, especially seeing how their run defense is and how their offensive line is. You have to dominate in the trenches. But it might very well possibly, knowing how the Chargers are, knowing the Vikings do have a really good offense that the Chargers are going to have to look out for, this could very well possibly be another shootout game. And if it gets to a close game scenario, we know how that's going to go for the Chargers. Now for the rookie QB report, starting off with Anthony Richardson. I love the way Anthony Richardson has looked so far with all these rookie quarterbacks in general. You're going to have some highs, you're going to have some lows. It's just going to be how they manage those highs and those lows. For Anthony Richardson, it seems like the Cam Newton comparison is getting so close that it's getting really scary because Anthony Richardson has taken a lot of unnecessary hits like Cam Newton did in Carolina. Already in his first two games, he's had to be taken out of the game for some shot he took or some hit that he took. That's scary for him, but I like the way he's looked. I like the type of play he calls. Steichen is drawing up for him. Secondly, CJ Stroud didn't put up a whole lot of points or that, but he did pass for 300 yards. He's looking like he's got a really good connection with Nico Collins. He's finally getting into a rhythm, getting used to NFL speed and how NFL defenses work. And then thirdly, Bryce Young. A lot of people, Panthers fans, they were upset. You heard the boo birds. Listen, with all these rookie quarterbacks, it's just going to take time, especially with what Bryce Young has that he's working with. Bryce Young, out of all the rookie quarterbacks, is in the least successful situation. He doesn't have very many talented wide receivers, but he's still, obviously, like all rookie quarterbacks, has his mistakes, but he's still making some wow plays. It's just going to take time for all these guys. Ranking them this week, or from last week, Richardson 1, Stroud 2, Young 3. And then lastly, this is the last segment of the day. You know I had to get in some college football. The big game this week, Notre Dame versus Ohio State. The Buckeyes have to go into South Bend. Notre Dame, from all their perspective, they finally have a quarterback in Sam Hartman. This is a team, has a defense. All they needed was a quarterback. They're looking to make a statement in their own house. The biggest storyline in this game to me is going to be the Ohio State offense versus a pretty prolific Notre Dame passing defense. Now, in terms of sack per game, the Notre Dame defense is bottom among FBS, but they are one of the most top passing efficient defenses. To combat the pressures, they're a very good blitzing team, and they're very creative. They've got 70 pressures, while opponents have completed 44% of their passes for 2 touchdowns. Now, here's the thing, the little added context on top of that, is the Notre Dame defense on Saturday is going to be facing a much more prolific offense than they've had to face all year this year. I mean, Navy, they don't even throw the football. And then the couple other teams that they had to face, it's not going to be like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. So that's going to be the biggest test for Notre Dame is the Ohio State offensive passing game. Now, for Ohio State, they do have Kyle McCord. He looked really solid in the Western Kentucky game, but you want to see if he can build that against the Notre Dame defense, particularly with that offensive line. 3 new starters on that offensive line. You're going to have to, those tackles in terms of the blitzes and especially the guards are going to have a way to pass off that and not have any miscommunication whatsoever that can lead to a possible strip sack fumble. That's going to be the biggest storyline. The second biggest storyline will, of course, be those Buckeyes wide receivers versus that Notre Dame secondary. Notre Dame, they had Ben Morrison, who last year as a freshman, 82.2 PFF grade, 6 interceptions. Then they have the senior Cam Hart, absurd athletic profile, and someone who can go toe-to-toe with Marvin Harrison Jr.'s athletic profile. It's going to be a fun game to watch. The Ohio State defense, I think they're going to keep that Notre Dame offense in check. It'll be slow to start out, but the second half is when we see a lot of these offenses start to get into a rhythm. I'm going to take Notre Dame in this game just because with Sam Hartman, I think they still find a way. Kyle McCord is really young. How's he going to handle this type of environment in that Notre Dame environment? That'll be a tough test for him. So, but even if Ohio State does lose, this is a top 10 opponent that you're losing to. So as long as you lose by about 3 points, a really close game, you still have some other games like Penn State, Michigan in the Big Ten where you can really set your resume up for the college football playoff and show the committee you are worthy of being in the playoffs. That concludes this podcast episode. I appreciate all of y'all listening. The Textbook Sports Squad, this channel, this page is growing. I appreciate every single one of y'all. Let me know what you think of this episode in the comments section. Go to my YouTube, Spotify, TikTok account, type in That's Textbook Sports or at That's Textbook Sports. Click on the profile, click follow, be a friend, tell a friend, share this podcast with those who love football, who love sports in general. Appreciate every one of y'all. Take care. Have a wonderful day. God bless. And until next time.